know
I'm sorry?
I don't even know right now.
It's hard for her to know how to feel when it's been pumped in her head for 16 years. Something that didn't
Start that, please.
It's not your fault.
Stop.
And are you glad to know the results?
I still don't think my mom's lying to me.
Okay, look, what these people are interested in is that you would at least show some graciousness towards your father who has for 15 years walked around with people thinking that he is some kind of pervert that hurt his daughter.
So as you guys know, I was a normal woman selling copiers in Milwaukee when I was sent a Kevin Samuels video. This video led me into an online world of red pill content, PUAs, and dating and relationship content. This content led me to test out some of these ideas by interviewing 1,000 women. There were lessons in the process, but today I want to talk about the curse of the modern mother. For the sake of this show, I am going to need to define traditional and modern. There is a spectrum between traditional and modern. It's not black and white, but for all intents and purposes, traditional mothers are mothers that put the family over themselves. A modern mother is one that puts herself before the family. So oftentimes, guys, I will say, and a lot of people get offended by this, but traditional women are married before 25. The reason I say that is because traditional women spend their youth on their family. That's the most important thing to them. Where modern women tend to spend their youth on themselves and then start a family later. One is not better or worse, they're just different. Another thing that I tend to say is traditional women believe in obeying their husbands, where modern women tend to want more of a 50-50 partnership, and they will say things like you need to negotiate with your husband. A traditional woman says whatever he says goes. One is not better or worse, I just have to define them. If more women were brutally honest with themselves, we would figure out that most women are not meant to be mothers, because being a mother is selfless. Meaning you have to think about your husband and children before yourself. But we live in a world where women are told and enabled to put themselves first for a lifetime. Do you have a child and a lucrative career? State-sponsored daycare. Why raise your kids when someone else can? Why cook your husband dinner when Uber Eats is an option? Why clean the house when you can leave it messy or hire mates? Neither is better or worse per se, but one thinks about the husband and children first, and one thinks about herself first. It blew my mind how many women I had met that were married to high-earning men and still believed they needed to work. They were lying to themselves. Sure, I understand that there's a recession, but you can move to a smaller house and spend more time with their children. But the money and the lifestyle was more important than the kids. Gen Z women rank men as 7th in their list of priorities. They put things like travel, work, and education above men. But how did society get here, where marriage is falling apart and the sexes are more and more divided? When interviewing women, I break down the women in a couple categories by age group. The 70 to 90-year-old women were the beginning of the end of the generation of traditional women. Women in their 70s lived through a lot of the decline of society and were part of it, but I would still say that half are fairly traditional, meaning that when I ask them questions about obeying their husbands and things that show how they felt about traditional dynamics, they at the very least gave me traditional answers. The issues these women have is that even the traditional ones told their daughters not to be traditional. Being that I was in London, I interviewed a lot of women from traditional countries who shared with me that their mothers told them to get an education and not spend their youth on a family. 50 to 70-year-old women on a balance of probabilities were the first generation of truly shitty wives. This is where I see the femininity leave the culture. These women will swear tooth and nail that they are different than the young women today, but I saw little difference in their answers. They were the first generation of women who divorced their husbands and broke up their family. Every generation pretty much gets worse until we hit millennial women who are so bad that we don't even make it down the aisle. Each generation has offered less and less traditional skills, so it's no wonder we have less and less traditional outcomes. Again, I am not saying one is better or worse. Maybe Oprah's husband is happy. They have cooks, so who needs a housewife? What I am saying different than before, and the sexes are more and more divided. I have a lot of empathy for the women I interviewed on some level. I found that probably more than half of women, I would guess 80%, have been alienated from their father in some way. They have been told from a young age that if they submit to a man, he will abuse them. So many mothers instilled fear in their daughters, even women that had been married 30 plus years. Stay-at-home wives would frame the father of their children as deadbeats, as if they worked a lot, and even calling themselves single mothers. Traditional marriages, the wives would complain to the kids and call their husbands toxic. Young women would say some off-the-cuff negative trait about their father, and when I would ask them to name specifics, they never could. It was really clear that the mother was telling them these things. I came to the realization that almost 90% of daddy issues were actually mommy issues. They were mothers that could not regulate their emotions and used their children as emotional tampons. I saw this consistently across race, culture, and religion. Mothers hate the fathers of their children so much that they make the children pay for it. I saw this on both sides of my work, from interviewing men who were victims of divorce rape to interviewing women who were victims of parental alienation. Some women figure it out when they're older, some never will. So it's no wonder that the family is breaking down the way it is. Mothers teach their daughters to hate their fathers, and the cycle continues. A couple stories from this period that stuck with me. There was one man whose wife said that he had raped her the first time they hooked up 10 years ago at the beginning of their relationship. After this supposed rape, they were together for 10 years and had 2 children. She shared that story with the children. The children spent the beginning of their adult life believing it. There was another woman who I spoke with whose mother told her that her dad was abusive, and she found out at 25 years old that she lied. She had not seen her father for 15 years at that point. She hated him her whole childhood. Another phenomenon was how many women I interviewed who thought it was perfectly acceptable to tell their children under the age of 10 why their marriage ended. They would tell me that their kids are going to see that they're upset and ask why, and they clearly had to tell them. It always conveniently blamed the father. If the father cheated, the women always thought it was acceptable to tell the children. When I suggested they control their emotions and maybe not do that, they looked at me like I was crazy. There was a couple of archetypes of women that I found. One is the competing mother. These are mothers that compete with their daughters. It's very obvious once you see it. Many of them flirt with their daughters' boyfriends. Whenever something good happens for their daughters, they need to steal the attention, and they cannot deal with their children getting more attention than them. Many men even told me that their girlfriends' mothers would hit on them. Some of these men, this was their first sexual experience, was with their girlfriend's mother. These are the mothers that try to be young forever and dress like they are in their teenage years. The I missed out on my youth mother and the I did so much for you mother. These two archetypes, there's usually a crossover. The I missed out on my youth mother often married young or gave up a high-powered career in order to be a mother. Unfortunately, you can't serve 2 masters and you can't have it all, at least not at the same time. These are the women that kill themselves trying to do so. These are the women that give up things in order to have children. But it does not count if the women feel as though they should have chased the alternative. I found that many women felt like they missed out on a career or partying in their youth when they married young. They regret the decision and make sure the children know. This is where the I did so much for you comes from. This is where the mothers that want recognition for doing the bare minimum of raising the children you chose to have. I did so much for you equals I only give in order to get. I missed out on this equals I wanted to party or chase a career more than be a mom. The I hate your father mother. These are the mothers that hate the fathers of their children so much that they make their kids pay for it. These are the mothers that say things like, you are just like your father, as if being like your father is a bad thing. These women married men that they don't like in order to have children, and every chance they get, they belittle him. These are the mothers who make passive-aggressive jokes and disrespect the father of their kids every chance they get. When these women get divorced, they make sure the entire town knows why. They play victim even to the point of filing false abuse allegations. I have an example of this, but I'm going to show it after I'm done reading the last one. The social media mothers. These are the mothers that use their children to build their brand. Growing up, all children deserve a sense of privacy, but for whatever reason, these mothers think it is more important to show off that they are a mother and even show personal moments of their kids' childhood, sometimes having tantrums and posting it online. It is very obvious by their social media posts what they are trying to signal. Look at me, I am a great mom. This in itself is not traditional because traditional women don't like to bring attention to themselves. There are many archetypes of mothers, and these are certainly not all of them. But I'm going to show you a clip that demonstrates the I hate your father mother.
I'm sorry?
I don't even know right now.
It's hard for her to know how to feel when it's been pumped in her head for 16 years. Something that didn't
Start
happen.
that, please.
Not your fault.
Stop.
And are you glad to know the results?
I still don't think my mom's lying to me.
You said you wanted the poly results, and you
Thank
have
you.
them. And you heard me say that I believe your mother is well-intentioned.
Yeah. I love my mom.
Nobody is asking you to do anything other than have love and loyalty for your mother. I hope this can be taken off the table and you and your mother.
And one thing that really surprised me in my year of doing interviews was how often women would tell these outlandish stories that had no basis and how often false accusations happen. When I was growing up, I always thought it was a one-off, or if a woman said a crazy story, I would assume it was true. I wouldn't think people lied about that. But in my year of shows, every other woman, maybe that's an over-exaggeration. I would say at least one woman a show, or every other show, a woman said that she was abused. And if I asked a couple questions, I would say 85% were lying because their story didn't match the facts. So here, this woman told her daughter for 16 years that her dad molested her when she was a kid. You would be shocked how many accusations like that happen. When I was interviewing men that were victims of divorce rape, there's one guy I interviewed that was his job. So his job was when a man was divorce raped. And when I say divorce raped, it just basically means a woman is pulling the nuke button in divorce. So she's using every possible tactic. There's a book called How to Destroy a Man, and it teaches women the step-by-step guide of how to use the false accusation system against men. So you would be surprised how common that is. And this man that worked with those men told me that there's a ton of men every year that commit suicide because of accusations like this, because the whole town thinks they're a pedo. And a lot of times because family court is not based on evidence, it's based on a balance of probabilities, those men can still lose access to their children. So a lot of times women go to family court where they know they don't actually need evidence. They pull these accusations. They may even post on social media about how the dad did that. They ruin this guy's reputation. Some of them even go so far to say this stuff to the man's friends and families. And a lot of these guys get so overwhelmed because, some of them are older, some of them are in their 50s, that they just end up committing suicide. The average age of first suicide is, I think, 45 for men, or there's an increase. I can't remember the exact stat, but it's around the first age of divorce. Because a lot of guys, they get to that age, and they see, I have to start over, and I have maybe 20 years left. It might just be easier to, So this type of thing, it's more common than you would think.
Can take this from between you and you can talk about this. Have you heard me say that your mother was a liar? Have you heard me say that your mother was vicious or vindictive? You've not heard me say one thing.
I'm not mad at you, but when I hear other people with my mom.
Okay, look, what these people are interested in is that you would at least show some graciousness towards your father who has for 15 years walked around with people thinking that he is some kind of pervert that hurt his daughter.
Can I ask why I didn't get a lie detector? I asked for a lie detector to prove that I wasn't lying about.
If you would like to take a polygraph,
I would.
Mr. Tremarco is here today and prepared to administer that to you today.
Let's go.
You have a woman like this. What is she going to grow up to be? So, you know, I would have a lot of empathy for some of these women because a lot of them, their mom was in their ear. They came from really, really crazy backgrounds. Like there was one woman, and I guess this is a little off topic, but she was like 19 and she was infertile from Plan Bs. I mean, it was her own dumb decision, right? But it was a choice she made at 19 and she was like a nice girl. She was a sweetheart, to be honest. But, you know, they're raised in these like environments where a lot of times the mom is just in their ear poisoning the entire well for years. So what do you get? The saddest part for me, I would do these divorce documentary interviews. So when I was in London, there was a point where I was filming so much. It was crazy. I was so busy because I was working on a divorce documentary. I was also doing all these shows. And I would interview the men that were divorce raped. So they would bring in their pile of papers and they would tell me these awful stories. And guys, these stories, I don't know how conservatives still push marriage after hearing stories like I have heard. I'm sure they haven't. They have to be naive. Because if there was a pill, right? If there was a pill and there was a 15% chance or a 5% chance of a guy going through what those men went through without knowing the consequences, I would feel like it was immoral to push it. Even if maybe 50% had great outcomes and it was amazing. That 5% chance, I would feel responsible if it happened and I was the one pushing it.